This is For the Rest of Us with the Reverend Canon Megan Castellan, a podcast about life, faith, theology, and the Bible, for the rest of us. Well, hello, friends. Welcome back to For the Rest of Us with the Reverend Canon Megan Castellan. Yeah, I'm not Megan. If only I could be. If only I was strong enough. No, I am her intrepid co-pilot, Adam Eichelberger. I work with Megan at the Episcopal Diocese of Central New York. I was a lifelong Catholic, and in a couple weeks, I'll officially be an Episcopalian, not just in name, but in fact.
Yay!
Megan is just helping me do all of my homework, figuring out life and faith through the lens of the Episcopal Church. You can kind of consider her my Sophia Petrillo to my Dorothy Zbornak, as we're just trying to figure out life. And boy, Megan, thank you for being a friend.
Thank you for being a friend. Gotcha.
So we have covered a lot lately, and I'm hoping that we can, as we are looking towards Holy Week and Easter, that we can take a break from the bummer train and talk about something a little different to lift up our spirits maybe a little bit, maybe give us a little bit of insight to the things that maybe we don't understand about the super churchy things that we do. Megan, what are we talking about this time on For the Rest of Us?
Today, I thought we would talk about the liturgies of the Triduum and the mysterious woman behind it all. Dun dun.
Ooh. So this is good for me, especially one, when you say things like the mysterious woman behind it all, but two, this is one of those times where I get to fill in all these gaps and my Catholic credits transfer. Because again, friends, I'm going to peel back the curtain a little bit. Like, my particular flavor of Catholicism basically said, we are right and everyone else is wrong. And then when I hear fancy church fancy church nerd words like Triduum, I'm like, haha, it's the same thing.
We have that too. Yep.
Yeah. So let's get into it. Tell us all about Triduum.
So the Triduum is a fancy church word for the big 3 days of the church year, those being Maundy Thursday, Good Friday, and Easter Sunday, which generally the way we celebrate it tends to be the Easter Vigil because of the way our liturgies are written. So these are the kind of high point of our liturgical year. These mark the days when Jesus was betrayed, crucified, buried, and then, hooray, rose again. And in our current prayer book, these liturgies were extensively rewritten from what they were in the 1928 prayer book. Had you looked at the 1928 prayer book, we had liturgies for these, but they were just kind of your basic Eucharist liturgies. There were special readings for morning prayer and evening prayer. We didn't do a whole lot necessarily. Churches did if they wanted to, if they were more of an Anglo-Catholic flavor, but there wasn't, particularly up before the 60s, there wasn't a kind of emphasis on the liturgical reenactment of them. Then we have the liturgical renewal movement of the 50s and 60s, where sort of everybody together, the Roman Catholics, the Orthodox, us, the Lutherans, the Methodists somewhat later, kind of at the same time, more or less, rediscover the roots of our common liturgical heritage. And everybody kind of together dives back into revitalizing our liturgy. And so that's one of the big reasons why our liturgy looks like the Catholic liturgy, which looks like the Lutheran liturgy, it looks like the Methodist liturgy. It's because literally in the 50s and 60s, all the scholars were getting together at conferences and trading notes and reading each other's prayer books, because for the first time in a long time, people were trading the original documents and kind of getting back into it. Can you hear that sound through my... Okay, cool. Because my husband is blasting a podcast about ephemera. Anyway, one of the big roots of our liturgical observances in Holy Week comes from a 4th century, possibly nun, by the name of Egeria. And she doesn't get a lot of credit, which is why I like to talk about her. Egeria was a woman. We think she might have been a nun. She could have just been super devout widow. We don't know. Possibly from Spain. Again, we're not entirely sure. But she goes on pilgrimage to the Holy Land in the mid-4th century. So super early. Constantine has just legalized Christianity. We're beginning to pull together the ecumenical councils. Not a whole lot has happened yet. She goes to Jerusalem and she lives there for over 3 years. And she travels around the Holy Land, visiting different holy sites. And she sends back to her community in again, somewhere in Europe, possibly Spain, really detailed notes on what Holy Week and liturgical observances looked like for Christians in the Holy Land. These are the first accounts we have of liturgical observances. And so she describes things like the local population walking on Palm Sunday from Bethany over the Mount of Olives, everyone singing, waving palms, reenacting the entry into Jerusalem. She describes the prayers they said. She describes what the bishop said. She describes where they went. She describes the reenactment of the Stations of the Cross through the city of Jerusalem, where Jesus was scourged, where he was presented by Pilate, where he was tried, and stopping at the different places and saying prayers on Good Friday, and sort of reenacting that. She describes that really specifically. She describes the prayers and devotions at, she calls it the Anastasis. Now it's the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, but the literal place where Calvary was, and then the tomb, and then the resurrection. She describes those rituals as well. And she also describes the things that we now take for granted, like the veneration of the cross. She describes the all-night vigil on Maundy Thursday. The faithful would go to the Gethsemane garden and pray together all night on Thursday to fulfill Christ's request that you sit and wait with him. Almost all of the kind of special Holy Week things that we take for granted were first described by Egeria when she was in the Holy Land. And so, we sometimes think of our liturgy as, to quote my music professor, as descending from heaven in a glad bag, sort of ahistorically. But in fact, most of what we do has been practiced by Christians for 2,000 years and continues to be practiced today by Christians in the Holy Land. And we know this because of this plucky woman named Egeria who wrote these letters. And you can go online and search Egeria and Holy Week and read what she wrote. It's pretty cool. And so her writing was one of the major sources for the liturgical renewal movement to go back and kind of recapture what people have been doing for so long. So we start off on Palm Sunday, which is also called the Sunday of the Passion, with the Palm Sunday procession. So you might be in a church where you gather outside if it's nice and sunny, or around here, probably inside, and you just walk through the building. But it is traditional to have kind of the service broken into two parts. There's the beginning part where you read the story of Jesus entering Jerusalem in triumph, and then you sing a song, and as you sing the song, you wave the palms and you walk to sort of reenact what Jesus experienced, and to enter into what Christians have been doing for 2,000 years, to kind of reenact that entry. And then later on in the service, the congregation generally reads in parts the whole Passion narrative.
This has always been confusing for me
Hmm.
because we read the Passion narrative on Palm Sunday,
Yes.
but then we do it all again on Good Friday. And I
Yes,
know
we
I'm
do.
kind of jumping ahead a little bit, and you're probably going to tackle all of that. It's never particular. I mean, for all of the time I've spent in churchy work, it's never made sense to me, and it's weird. Is there a reason behind all of that?
So, honest to goodness, the reason we do it on Palm Sunday is because the writers of the prayer book were grappling with the fact that a lot of people would not be able to come back to church on Good Friday.
Okay, that
And
makes
so
sense.
they wanted to kind of um, encapsulate some of the whole experience in one Sunday, and they were carrying over the previous prayer book's emphasis or de-emphasis on Maundy Thursday and Good Friday, but they didn't want to move right to Easter. So they kind of like cut the baby in half. So you would have Palm Sunday, all of the Passion, but like in half the service. So now you've raced through like the trial and Golgotha and all the stuff. So you did get a taste of that. And then you went to Easter, but you didn't have to necessarily go through the extra services because that would be like a little too Catholic if you were still like a super Protestanty, waspy Anglican.
Ugh, the worst.
They were trying to have it both ways because they weren't sure at the time what direction the liturgical reforms would ultimately take. I think it's safe to say at this point we're safely in the Triduum, have extra services, get yourself to church. Come on, guys, it's once a year camp. But Palm Sunday, Passion Sunday is a place where the prayer book still needs to kind of like sort itself out a little bit. My internship parish in Manhattan it had a lot of stage designers in the congregation, and so they got very into Palm Sunday. And at the end of the opening hymn, after we had done like the entry and triumph, they would literally have a team of stage hands go in and change all the colors and change all the vestments. So we would like physically enter into Holy Week. They would completely change the tone of the service and the organ would go silent and all of these things to really mark that change. But if you don't have a team of Broadway stagehands who are really into liturgical drama, I don't know that it quite works as well. And it's a hard thing to do. Mostly it's confusing. Your
All
mileage may
right.
vary.
All right. Fair enough.
And then we have 3 days of sort of hanging out. A lot of places do daily Eucharists during Holy Week. Then we come to Maundy Thursday, which is another kind of combination observance. It is called Maundy Thursday because of the great mandatum, or great command of our Lord, the giving of the command to love one another as I have loved you, that we read about in John's Gospel. For Episcopalians, this is also a time when we remember the giving of the Eucharist to us, so it's also a very big deal. It is also when we do foot washing. Um, Foot washing has now become pretty important in the life of the Episcopal Church, which I would argue is super good. And you do all of these things in the Eucharist. Within the context of the Eucharist, you read the story about Jesus washing the disciples' feet, Peter protesting, you celebrate the Eucharist. And after all of that is done, silence falls, you read Psalm 22, and the altar team strip the altar. And by that I mean you physically remove from the altar and the church space the consecrated elements, all altar hangings, all brass, all decorative elements, the flowers, anything and everything that can be carried gets out of the chancel space. Every church does this differently. I know one clergy colleague had a mentor who did it pretty violently, and would sort of like throw altar kneelers. I don't know that you need to do that. I
It's a
know
lot.
it's a lot. I don't know that it's helpful to be throwing stuff at that point. A lot of our stuff is also kind of old. It's going to break. The idea is to convey the sense of emptiness and loss and betrayal at the arrest of Jesus, which is what the thing you're marking at this point. If this is the part where your liturgical observance will probably bifurcate. Some churches will have a communion from the reserved sacrament on Good Friday. And so they will keep the elements, the consecrated elements, at what's called a chapel of repose. So they'll make a tabernacle or a separate consecrated area for the keeping of the consecrated elements, which is called the tabernacle. You'll see it in the chancel of the church or in the sacristy with a little light in front of it to let you know that Jesus is here, and then you turn off the light when Jesus is not here. It's like the psychiatrist is in or out sign on Lucy's lemonade stand. But you will generally construct a chapel of repose out of plants and greenery. So if the church has a chapel or like a parlor, you'll bring in all the house plants and decorate the space. And that's where Jesus will be. And then you'll have the all-night vigil in front of the altar of repose. And then use those elements for communion from the consecrated elements on Good Friday. The other way to go, and I'm not saying one of these is right and one of these is wrong. There are valid schools of thought for both. The other way to go is not to preserve the consecrated elements at this point and to make sure everything is consumed at the end of Maundy Thursday because you want to emphasize the emptiness and the absence. So you don't set up an altar of repose. You consume the sacrament and the tabernacle is left empty and open. And if you are a person, and this is what we did at my seminary, and it was my practice at the church where I was rector. If you are a person who is kind of mindful of always bowing to the consecrated sacrament at the tabernacle behind the altar, if you're a person who kind of like reflexively does that, it is the most destabilizing thing in the world to suddenly have a day where it's not there. Like it is a visceral sense of loss.
No, yeah, I mean, not to make it about me,
Yeah.
but I mean, from my own Catholic upbringing, like most of the churches I grew up in, there was a tabernacle and the tabernacle was empty and the doors are left open. And the reason Catholics genuflect or bow is they're reverencing the Eucharist in the tabernacle, and coming into church and like going through that motion like you normally would and then catching yourself is always a weird thing every time.
Yeah. It's like, oh, he's not there. He's not there. But it's a very powerful kind of reenactment of what the death of Jesus meant and how painful and visceral that was. And I remember when COVID happened and we had the shutdown, we emptied the tabernacle and left it open so that nothing would happen to the consecrated host. And it was that same sort of like eternal, again, it was like right in the middle of Lent. It was that sort of eternal Good Friday for a long time until we were able to come back into the church and reconsecrate stuff. So the end of Maundy Thursday is unfinished the way our liturgy is set up. You have a normal, what feels like a normal Eucharist service, and then it ends in silence and chaos because you've taken everything out of the chancel. The elements are either in a room somewhere else or they are gone, and everyone leaves in silence. It is meant to be unfinished and to feel chaotic because the design of the three services, Maundy, Thursday, Good Friday, and the Vigil, are meant to be one long service over the 3 days. And so even if you have the all-night vigil on Maundy, Thursday, the kind of flow of the liturgy over the 3 days is kind of kept intact. When you come back in on Good Friday, there's still no vestments. The clergy will only wear black cassocks. So kind of, and we don't wear Roman clothing anymore, so it kind of misses the impact. But were we in ancient Roman times, it would basically be like going around in an undershirt. It would be like super strange looking. There's no opening acclamation. You just start in with a collect. So the service doesn't it feels off. You do a series of prayers. You read John's Passion again. You do another series of prayers. The Episcopal Church does not include the reproaches in our Good Friday liturgy. They're not helpful in our theology. The theology of Good Friday is moving from like an individual sense of loss and pain to a global sense of call. James Farwell has a really good book about the expressed theology of the 3 days of liturgy, which I would commend to you. They have been experienced as anti-Semitic over the years. So we do not include them. One of the things that you kind of feel happening in the 3 days of liturgy is that at the point of Good Friday, as you are marking the death of Jesus, the prayers for the world begin to become more global. The church is beginning to step into the role of embodying Christ to the world. As Christ is dying, we begin to pray and intercede for the world for which Christ died. So there's a looking out, there's a kind of taking up the mantle as we bear witness to the death of Christ. And so for that reason, the liturgists didn't want to kind of stay with the kind of guilt of why this was happening over much.
It makes sense.
Again, the service ends without a conclusion. There's no blessing, there's no dismissal. There's just silence and everyone leaves. Because it's supposed to feel bad. It's supposed to feel confusing and not right. Like something's missing. And there's no, like, things aren't right because Jesus is dying. Things aren't right. It's very bad. And in a lot of ways, it mimics the experience of grief and of profound trauma that something huge has gone wrong. You don't know what's going on. All of your normal kind of signposts for your life have been obliterated, and you're just kind of trying to string things back together, but it's not quite going right. Some churches, again, do a quick communion from the reserved sacrament, but a lot of churches don't. I personally prefer having one day where that's not accessible to, again, mark the absence. But if you prefer to have communion on the reserved sacrament, go with God. But then we get the vigil, which is the best Lollapalooza of liturgy ever. So the vigil is another Egeria special. It starts in darkness, usually outside, unless the weather is awful. And again, doesn't start the way it's supposed to. You come together in darkness and you light a fire before you do anything else. And this is the new fire of Easter.
We do
In
love
Jerusalem,
fires.
I have a funny story about the fire, which I will tell in a minute. And Egeria describes this event, which still happens, and inshallah will happen this year, every year at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And when she was there, the Anastasis, its precursor building, in the tomb of Christ, the priests will go in, sweep it the day before for kindling, flint, matches, lighter fluid, everything, clean it out. And then the night before Easter, there will be the miracle of the new fire. Fire will kindle in the tomb to symbolize the resurrection. And from the tomb of Christ, the fire will be spread throughout the crowd that is waiting to witness this miracle. It will be spread throughout the crowd. They will put it on special 33 candles and put it on a plane to Greece and light the Greek Orthodox Patriarch's new fire from that. Like it literally, and you can watch this on YouTube nowadays. The miracle of the new fire has been happening at least since Egeria was there, and she describes it. And so that's what we are emulating when we do our new fire, is that God produces life from the darkness and light from the darkness. And even in times when the authorities have closed access to the church, it still happens that we know. So, light breaks forth in the darkness. We sing the most kick ass prayer in the history of prayers, the
Oh yeah.
Exultet, which is my church musical final, because I had to sing it, which is this cool, long Doctor Who like prayer, also from the 4th century, that like calls on all the cosmic powers and all parts of the earth to rejoice with us, for this is the night when God saved the Israelites from the Egyptians. God brought humanity out of death into life. God struck down the powers of hell and punched Satan in the nose. That's paraphrase and not technically in the Latin, but you like sing for 5 minutes. The original 4th century text also has like a whole paragraph about also praise now our Lord, marvelous bees, contributors of the wax for this great candle, which unfortunately the Episcopal text has taken out, and I am still sad about that. The Lutheran text has it, and one day we will put in back the section about the bees. But it's this great prayer, kind of condenses past, present, and future, talks about how, God has redeemed the cosmos and tramped down death by death, and we are saved because of this light. Sing the praise of this light with me. It's very like timey-wimey, cosmic woo, and you're singing in darkness in front of a candle, which is very cool. You basically rehearse the story of salvation through time. Again, Egeria special. It's a little like sitting around a campfire telling old stories to kill time until the really great thing happens. So you sit in the dark for the first part of the church service, and you can read up to 10 readings before the lights come on, starting from the creation in Genesis through the fall of Adam, binding of Isaac, the crossing of the Red Sea. The prophets show up a lot. There are a couple you have to read: binding of Isaac, deliverance at the Red Sea, creation. And then once you've read as many as you want and you've sung some psalms and you've gone through it, you do baptisms if there are those to be baptized. This is like the best baptismal date. And again, according to Egeria, this was the time people were baptized. Traditionally, you'd be preparing for baptism all through Lent, and this was your moment to be baptized in the dark before the light of the dawn of Easter rose. And then, once all that has been accomplished, if you were in Jerusalem, the sun would have come up and Easter day would have dawned, and you could proclaim the first Alleluia and proclaim the gospel and celebrate the Eucharist. And the lights would come on, and now it's Easter, and everything is glorious and wonderful again. For us, usually you're flipping a switch and telling the organist to play, and the service returns to its normal factory settings. So you go back to the prayer book the way we are used to it
Factory
being.
default. I love that.
Normal factory default. And that is the conclusion of the 3 days, that you have gone through this journey and you arrive back at the glory of Easter and light breaking forth out of the darkness. A lot of places, they'll ask you to bring noisemakers or bells or keys to ring throughout the Easter hymns. So you can make a lot of noise. You sing all the Alleluia songs, like you dance and jump up. Like, for as staid as Episcopalians could be, we really like the Easter Vigil Alleluia part because it's just super dramatic and awesome. So that's the basic shape of the Triduum liturgy. Um, and it is dramatic. It's meant to be dramatic. It's meant to feel like a big deal. Um, and meant to feel like you're watching something amazing happen right in front of you.
I dig that. I guess my one question,
Mhm.
I mean, like, I feel like I know, but I don't. And I'm gonna ask it, and you can let me know if I'm asking a stupid question. So we often, like, especially in my own upbringing, we hear it's the holiest time of the year, which
Mhm.
kind of feels like, one, Sundays aren't as holy now,
Mhm.
and two, like, Christmas isn't. Is that something that we as Episcopalians say and believe, or not so much? Like, is this the holiest time of the year?
I don't know that one time of year is holier than another. I mean, I feel like, and I'm biased because 'cause I've always loved Holy Week, like, I was the kid who's like, "I'm going to church all the time." Also, I was a theater kid, so this super appealed to my sense of, like, drama.
Nerd.
Like, I know, there was just no hope for me at all. So I think it kind of feels more might feel more holy because 'cause you're just literally at church a lot. There's just, like, a lot that is emotionally intense about the church that you're going to, and there is an aspect of Holy Week and this story that I think we kind of underplay, which is this is a traumatic story. This story, when you just read it, if you've ever explained the story of the Passion to a kid for the first time, this story is horrible. It's a really painful story to hear, even as often as we kind of like go through it and we are used to it and we're kind of used to the rhythm of it. There is something really emotionally taxing about living in this story for a week. I think maybe that is what people feel, particularly and I think maybe as Americans, we don't know how to name that or we've become numb to it in a way, but we're living in a story of, Jesus, whom we love, whom we like because we talk about him all the time, this familiar beloved figure who is having horrible things done to them, and it kind of brings back all the kind of resonances of the horrible things we also are witnessing all the time in the world. Like, this is just a hard week to sort of emotionally be present for. So I would say I don't know that it's the holiest time of the year. It can be super emotional in a way that surprises people, I think. And I don't know that the church is always great at leaving space for that.
That's fair. It's funny you mentioned like this is traumatic
Yeah.
because like I never really consider that this is traumatic because I hear it over and over again, and it's good to hear like, hey, like we got to remember this is a sad thing. This is a hard thing, and we should be mindful of that.
Yeah, I mean, I remember and again, let's remember that I have always been an on-brand person, and there is just no hope for me ever being anything approaching cool. But when I was, I think 8, 7 or 8, my church had a children's Good Friday service, and I remember the priest taking us around to the Stations of the Cross and explaining what was happening in, like, kid level language. I was distraught. I was so upset because I hadn't fully grokked the idea that Jesus died, and I really liked Jesus. I he was the guy who was in all the cool stories, and I knew people who had died by that point, and so the idea that Jesus, this person I liked, was having horrible things happen, and he died was I was a mess. My mom had to, like, carry me out of the church. I was so upset, and I think the priest thought I was having some sort of, like, spiritual revelation, and I wasn't. I was just super upset about injustice and things, but I think we need to let the story be as emotional as it is, because part of what we are reminded during Holy Week is that God came into what is a really traumatic story so that we wouldn't be alone in our traumatic stories. God came and became part of all of our stories of trauma and all of our stories of loss and grief and suffering so that there wouldn't be a place of brokenness that was without God. And so I think, we don't need to like kind of Mel Gibson it up, but to to let it be as emotional as authentically as possible, I think is good.
I agree. So, I mean, for me, this has been like super helpful because like it gives me some context. It shows me similarities and differences. It's good to see that there are similarities with sibling Christian churches. So, this is good for me as I go into
Mhm.
Holy Week. My last one as an actual not Episcopalian because I've been
Mhm.
saying it, but now it's going to be official because I get welcomed in. We get received into the Episcopal Church during the Easter season, which we're super stoked about. All right. So we do need your thoughts about something. And I think we may have possibly talked about this before on the podcast, but it's okay if we revisit it. We have to know
Mhm.
it's Easter morning.
Yep.
Everyone's up. You go to
Yep.
church. You do
Yep.
the baskets. They've gone to bed. There are still candy in the Easter basket.
Mhm.
Megan, what are you stealing out of your kid's Easter basket? What is your go to Easter candy every year? And if you say peeps, I'm going to lose it.
Not Peeps, no.
Good.
Reese's peanut butter eggs
Correct.
and black jelly beans.
Okay, now we have a problem. That is unhinged.
It is my servant ministry to my family that I'm the only person who likes them, so I must eat them so that everyone else is saved for them. But they're really good. I like them. They're very good.
Okay, so we don't yuck anyone's yum on this show. So you're allowed to have your opinions even though they're wildly wrong. The other correct answer was Cadbury eggs. Cadbury eggs are the other best go.
Cadbury eggs are too sweet, though. It's too
Yeah, but
much.
it's once a year. You're not doing like if you're not doing it all year long, that'd be crazy. But once a year,
Maybe, maybe. Do you wanna hear my, time my Easter Vigil almost got shut down
absolutely we
on
do.
account of the fire? So, in Arizona, they have red flag warnings all the
Mhm.
time on account of the
Can
fire.
confirm.
One year, because I was working with college students, the Lutherans and the Episcopalians would always go in together for an Easter Vigil, and because they were college students, they wanted to start it at midnight. Because what are they gonna do, sleep? No. We had our campus ministry building in the middle of a giant parking lot, and so I experimented and found I could build a pretty good fire on, like, a little portable grill, Weber grill, like, out in the middle of the parking lot. What I had not counted on, they do air patrols for the red flag warning, and that after we had lit the new fire, doused it, come in the building, and I was happily singing to my little candle, the Mormon fire chief would not be dissuaded from trying to shut the whole thing down. So we lit the new fire, we come inside, and I'm, like, halfway through the exultet, and it's nice and dark, and there's, like, pretty light, and all of a sudden we hear, "Bang, bang, bang, bang! Flagstaff Fire Company, open up. You violated the red flag warning. Bang, 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 bang." And I'm like, "Nope. Imma keep singing. We don't stop the liturgy, and I'm just gonna keep singing," and nobody knew what to do. And I'm trying to communicate to the Lutheran chaplain with, like, ESP. "Fritz, go," not moving. And so, like, he keeps banging, and he's like, "Okay, if you don't answer, I'm gonna knock down the door." And I'm just like, "Singing to the fire, la, la, la." Finally, Fritz goes and opens the door, and they're like, "What are you doing? Why was there a fire that we saw?" And Fritz was like, "It was contained. It was in a Weber grill. It was in the middle of, like, 2 acres worth of empty parking lot. Like, we're doing the Easter Vigil." And they were like, "We don't know. We do not know what this practice is you speak of." So, it was a near brush with the authorities
Haters
at,
gonna
like,
hate, man.
haters gonna hate at, like, 12:15 in the morning on Easter Day.
That's crazy. That is
It was
absolutely
exciting.
nuts. Well, hey, gang, thank you so much once again for joining us on For the Rest of Us. If we don't get a chance, if we don't see you before, we hope that you have an absolutely amazing and blessed Easter. Do us a favor as you make your way out the door, like we always do. Hey, we ask you, if you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe on whatever app you listen to podcasts on, share it with a friend, leave us a review, especially the good ones. Leave Megan some black jelly beans in the review section
Yes,
and
please.
in the rating section because that's what she's looking forward to this Easter, and we can't wait to talk to you next time for the rest of us. Thanks for stopping by and checking out For the Rest of Us. If you like the show, leave us a review and a rating. Make sure to subscribe and share it with a friend. We hope to see you again next time. For the Rest of Us is a production of the Episcopal Diocese of Central New York.